Hey, what's up guys, my name is Crash, and today we're doing a review on Dragon's Dogma 2. This game is really great, but it took a lot of major step backs, and we're going to go over that today. Let's get the least important part out of the way. The character customization. The character customization in this game was done pretty well. I personally thought it was actually done better than most games. Usually I spend like 5 to 10 seconds making a character, but in this game it actually had so much variety of like hairstyles, face features. You can even change the way that your character walks, which is really cool. There's a whole bunch of characters that other people have made, and it's awesome to see. Like someone made Kratos from God of War, Leon from Resident Evil, and a whole bunch of other games. And it's awesome to see that type of stuff, and I'm happy that you're able to do that. And it actually looks good too. Like the game graphically doesn't look half bad. So when you see these characters, you can tell immediately who they are and what they're from, which is amazing in my opinion. Now let's talk about the most important thing. The gameplay. The gameplay in this game is actually amazing. I didn't almost have any type of issues with it. I enjoyed almost every second of playing the game. We'll start with just the normal enemies. The normal enemies in this game are actually really fun to fight. Usually with these types of games, usually they can get kind of annoying. And don't get me wrong, they do at some point in time. Sometimes I feel like the enemy spawn rate is a little bit janked up because you'll end up finding a whole bunch of enemies, and after you wipe out a squad, you'll end up seeing like another batch of 8, and then after you kill those ones, you'll see another batch of 8. It seems a little bit messed up, and I don't know if it's intentionally that way, because from what one of the devs said, he doesn't like the idea of fast travel and stuff in this game, and he said if you have to fast travel, the game's boring. I'm pretty sure that's like pretty much the quote, which is an interesting way of putting it, and I kind of get what he means. Fast traveling means that the game's really not holding you in, but I didn't use the fast travel all too much that they have, like the ox carts or the fairy stones. So you was right on that. The game is actually really fun. Like usually I didn't want to use them. I wanted to travel the world and see all the different stuff that you can find, like different people to interact with, the different enemies that you can find. But let's get into the next part, which is the bosses. The bosses are awesome. I mean, like, the ones that you find around the world, I don't know if you can count them as quote-unquote bosses. Like, there's, like, ogres and, like, werewolf-looking things, griffins, dragons, you can name it, chimeras, Medusa. It's cool. Like, there's a lot of stuff to be fighting, and I love the idea of being able to climb onto them. It makes the battles seem 10 times more epic. I'll make sure to put some of these on the screen so you can get a general idea of how the combat goes. And I don't know, it just makes you feel like you're part of like this intense battle and you're fighting against all odds. It gets a little bit iffy when you get into your second playthrough. You'll notice your character does a little too much damage, if that makes sense, because it seems like the game doesn't scale after you finish it. So when I got into my second playthrough, like certain enemies that I was fighting, like the goblins and stuff, were getting one shot. And I don't know if that's because the game just doesn't know how to process like a level scaling yet, or if it's intentionally supposed to be that way. But I was hoping it was going to be like Souls, where it gets a little bit harder. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm fine with like 2 to 3 shotting the beginning enemies, but I was literally one-shotting them as I was walking around, which kind of sucks. But yeah, it's really great. Another thing that makes the gameplay in this game really good is the vocations. The vocations are actually amazing. I love the idea. I wasn't expecting it to be as fun as it was. There's a whole bunch of different ones. Usually I play warrior class in these types of games, so I was playing the fighter and then the warrior. I was like, okay, these are pretty fun. But then, for the first time ever, I tried a magic class in a game. I usually never go with magic in any of these types of games. I usually find it kind of boring, but I guess it's like a mix of the two, so I was fine with it. I played the Mystic Spear Hand, and it was amazing. I loved the combat in this game, and I'm going to go and try out all the other vocations, and I can feel that it keeps pulling me in, if that makes any sense. Like, I want to keep trying everything else and see like what I can do differently. The same thing with like quests and stuff. I want to see what other like outcomes you can get from doing different things throughout them. And it's crazy to me because usually most games aren't like this, where actually they're like one and done. Like personally, I feel like that's how it is with like Spider-Man and stuff like that. Usually after you beat them, you don't want to go back and check them out again. But like with games like this, after I beat it, I was immediately like, okay, let's hop right into the next playthrough and try out a different vocation. Or it's kind of reminds me of like how Elden Ring is, like how when I beat the game as like the samurai class, I immediately went back in and I was like, okay, let's try out the wizard or dexterity build, which is awesome to see in these types of games. Replayability is one of the most essential things that you want in your game, and it just can cause you to have like hundreds of more hours in the same game doing the same stuff, but with like a different like outcome, and it's awesome to see. Some of the drawbacks I can see in this game are definitely like the inventory system. I actually didn't really enjoy how it's set up. I understand that certain games want to do a weight system, but I don't know. Personally, I always found the weight system kind of annoying. I kind of like how Dark Souls does it, where you can carry as much as you want, but when it comes to like wearing armor and stuff, it kind of varies like on how you like level your skills out and stuff, if that makes any sense. I understand games don't want you to carry thousands of items in your inventory, and I'm guessing they do it for like optimization of the game so that you don't lag or something. At least that's what I would think in my mind as like the most like understandable reasoning to decide with this decision, at least in my mind. But aside from that, it's set up really well. The equipment and stuff that you can find throughout the game is very like little. Most of the time you'll have to end up going to like a store to buy a weapon, which is completely fine. To be honest, I like the idea that like stores and stuff are actually useful in a game for once. Most of the time when I play other games like this, like Skyrim or something, I'm not going to a store to buy a weapon. Why would I do that when I can find something that's 10 times better than that sword that you're selling at the market just in the next quest that's down the road? So at least the money that you have in the game actually has a value, and I really enjoyed that. Don't get me wrong, we're gonna go a little bit into it. There is some concerns with like the currency system, and it's not because of like the gold and stuff. It's more the RC and like the microtransactions. Most people didn't really go much into that, which is, if it's not really important to you, that's completely fine. But I always find a concern in microtransactions, and I'll talk about that a little bit later in the video. This last little part that I'm going to talk about with the gameplay is definitely for people that don't usually play games that aren't all too handholdy. Be ready for this game to not really teach you that much. And if you're not really into those types of games, maybe this might not be the best suited game for you. Personally, I would say still try to give it a check out. I would definitely instead decide to look up videos or something to kind of give you like guides and stuff. It kind of sucks that the game doesn't really help you all too much, but at the same time, that's how the game worked in the original, and this is how it's going to work in the second one, of course. And usually after a little bit, you'll figure it out. It's the same thing with like Dark Souls, where when you play them at first, you kind of just don't get it. It's trial and error, but over time, you'll end up getting it, if that makes any sense. Now let's talk about side quests in this game. They're very hit or miss in my opinion. You can go from fighting a griffin for this guy to make a sculpture, to a guy throwing fire bombs at eggs to destroy them so that the village doesn't get attacked, to picking plants. Yeah. It's very varied. If you're really into that, that's great for you. I personally am not interested in a lot of the side quests in this game. There is some really cool ones though. Like usually, I don't know, I'm very combat centric, or I'm fine with mystery type of side quests. Those can be very fun too. Those are at least where my line is drawn. If they're not like that, and they're more like, oh, can you go pick me a herb or something, or go buy this at a store or something, I'm personally not really into that. Or go save someone. Usually with those types of missions, I personally just don't find the fun in it most of the time, because at least in this game, they make you carry the person back, and it's like, I don't want to do that. At least in my eyes, it's very tedious and very annoying. And after you do a decent amount of the side quests, it can get kind of bothersome, because then people just start walking up to you with like a quest where they give you a piece of note, and then they just say, walk me from A to B. And personally, I hate escort missions, so when someone tells me to escort them A to B, I'm not fucking doing that. go walk yourself over there, Bubba. Like, that's not my, like, issue to deal with. At least that's how I see it. So speaking of quests and stuff, let's get into the story. If you guys don't want to hear anything about the story, like don't want spoilers or anything, I'm going to have a timestamp for the next part, which will be on the microtransactions and the performance issues. So let's get right into this. The story in this game is alright at best. I feel like there was a lot of major issues with it. I honestly was kind of disappointed. The game felt like it needed a bit more time to breathe, or it just didn't feel like it was paced right, if that makes any sense. Like, the pacing in the game was kind of off, at least in my eyes. Like, at the beginning of the game, pretty much what you're trying to do is take out the fake Arisen and the Queen and take your rightful spot on the throne. But after like a quarter way into the game, that whole quest line kind of just jumps off the cliff and doesn't come back. Like, at the beginning, like, you're suiting up and getting ready to do it, and like it seems like you're gonna end up fighting the false Arisen and stuff. Never see him again after like the first quarter. Like, I think you see him for a snippet of time, but I thought you were gonna end up fighting him at some point to take him out and maybe fight some pawns along the way, or even fight your own pawn at some point. But none of that ends up happening. It just was really whatever. It just needed to be paced better. It just felt like most of the time you were doing stuff that didn't really matter, or like characters were getting introduced that never played a role, that or did for 2 seconds and disappeared. Like, there's a girl that you meet at the castle that your character kisses, and after like 2 quests of seeing her, you never see her again. Like, where the hell did she end up running off to? The son of the queen is at least a little bit more fleshed out. Like, he has a couple side quests, but most of the time it's him just like yapping on about like how much his mom sucks and doesn't let him go outside and stuff. It's like, I don't care. That's not my problem, honestly. And pretty much that's his whole thing. And he helps you, which is interesting. So he actually plays a decent role. Her, on the other hand, she plays 2 seconds of like a plot. Like, she's in a cutscene showing that she is the bad guy, quote unquote. But then at the end of the game, you kind of see her for like 2 seconds, and you make her talk to her son, and then that's it. That's like, woo, you did it, woo. Same thing with Lord Faithus, or however you say it. He is another character where you kind of just see him for a bit. You don't really know much about him, but for some reason you're supposed to hate him right off the bat. So you meet him for 2 seconds, and then he ends up becoming a good guy at the end, depending on which ending you get. That is one thing I thought was interesting. It looks like there is 3 different endings to the game, which you can either leave at the end where the dragon is about to kill the girl. I'm guessing that ends with a mission fail. I might be wrong though. Fighting the dragon, but after you fight the dragon, there's like a secret ending you can get. That's the one I got, which was awesome. I actually enjoyed the way it ended. It added like 4 to 5 hours more of content, unless maybe that's how it's normally supposed to happen. I honestly don't know, but I thought that might have been the secret ending, but it was awesome. You got to see the world in like a worse light, and I thought, honestly, if that is the secret ending, that was probably the best part of the story so far. But most of the shit, like I said, isn't really pulling you in, and most of the time it feels like you're doing side quests. Like, some of the quests are you breaking out a guy out of jail and then escorting him to a new location, you fighting enemies and then heading back, you sneak into one place. Like, I think there's like 5 sneak missions, and none of them are fun, and they're all part of the main quest line. But yeah, honestly, if you're looking for a good story here, I wouldn't look at this game for that, at least in my opinion. Now that we're done with talking about the story, let's talk about the most disappointing things in this game. And these are the last 2 things I'm going to talk about. The first thing I want to talk about is the microtransactions. These are gross. Honestly, I think it's really disgusting to see some of the stuff that you can buy in this game. Like, you can get an Explorer's Kit for $3. Why is it $3? I don't know. The music and sound collection, sure, most games do charge for that, so I don't really mind stuff like that. but like a jail key for $1. Why are you spending $1 for a jail key? And why are you spending $2 to edit your character? That really annoys the shit out of me. And there's a reason for that. And that's because you cannot delete your save and make a new one unless you go into your files and delete it yourself. That should not be a thing. I understand at this point in time that they are working on different save files, but this should have never been an issue in the first place. Why is this like acceptable in their eyes to have a system that is set up like this? I honestly don't get it. It really annoys me. The other stuff you can buy is wake stones and rift crystals. If you want to buy them, you can, but I just hate that they put these in. And I understand some people this doesn't affect, and I feel like most of the time, at least when you're playing through the game, these aren't needed. But why is there even a price tag to even do it in the first place? It shouldn't be there, at least in my eyes. The other major issue, and this isn't just for PC before anyone says it, the performance issue. It is gross at some points in time. Sometimes the game runs at less than 30 FPS on console. Why is that happening? That is not... You can't play a game at less than 30 FPS. This is getting like back to the PS2 era at some point, where I'm running at like 15 to 20 because when I go to a city, ogre decides to spawn, which is cool. I honestly think it's awesome seeing like ogres and dragons and stuff fighting in cities. That's amazing. It makes everything feel like a huge event, but it shouldn't tank my frame rate down to 10 FPS whenever I see an ogre in the town because everyone wants to fight it. That really bothers me, because if you can't handle 8 characters on a screen, it really scares me if you try to do a DLC or anything that adds a whole bunch of enemies. I feel like at some point this is going to be fixed, but it shouldn't be happening in the first place. I personally didn't have any crashes. I don't know how bad it is on Steam. I decided not to buy it on Steam because of how bad the reviews I've seen were. Usually I'm a PC player, so I love playing stuff on PC, but once I seen like all the complaints about how the game, even with the 4090, sometimes can't even run at 60 FPS. I have an i9 and a 40 series card, so if I can't even run it at like 30 guaranteed, I'm not buying it on PC. At least on console, it's almost a guarantee for 30 FPS, but it shouldn't be an almost guaranteed. If my frame rate is going lesser than that, that is insane. And I don't know how they got away with it, or that they think that this is an acceptable state to drop the game in. But aside from these two issues, the game is still really fun. Like the gameplay, the side quests, and even the story, even though I wasn't a huge fan of it, do bring the game up into high praises. But stuff like this shouldn't happen, and if they do something like this again, I am definitely not going to buy the next game. Sorry, I got a little bit annoyed at the end of that, but the game is still worth a check out. My final thoughts is, even though the story is iffy, the microtransactions are absurd, and the performance is gross at points in times, the game is still worth a check out. I would maybe wait 2 weeks, maybe a month, to see if it gets better. Because honestly, at the state it is, this is more of like a do at your own risk type of thing, where it's still amazing, and personally, I'm going to keep playing it because I love it. It's just not for everyone at this point in time. But if you guys enjoyed the content, make sure to leave a like and a sub. If you guys have suggestions for anything else to check out, review, talk about, anything like that, make sure to leave them down in the comments down below. I'll make sure to check it out as quick as possible. But I'll see you guys next time. See ya.